He had it. He still couldn't believe that he had it. Very few professional thieves managed to steal something so valuable right from under the nose of the SCP Foundation, and even fewer lived to tell anyone about it. Kasdan gripped the bag in one hand, holding on to it so tightly, his knuckles felt like they might split. He was drenched in nervous sweat, the clamminess of his palms leaving an imprint on the material of the duffel bag. Its precious contents moved around loosely. Every time it jostled and knocked against him, Kasdan had to fight the urge to unzip the bag, just to remind himself this was all actually happening. But he resisted. He knew the mask wanted not only to be seen, but to be heard as well. The earpiece his client had provided was doing its job, keeping the whispers at bay, dampening the telepathic aura enough to ensure that Kasdan retained control over his own faculties. The bag, he'd been told, would also hopefully dampen the powers of the mask's corrosive fluid. He'd been prepped extensively for this job, more than any other in his long and storied criminal career. It had taken months of planning, staking out the home of a Foundation researcher, stealing his access card, and slipping into the heavily guarded facility undetected. As if that hadn't been hard enough, he then had to find the right containment cell containing what he'd been hired to steal. Just like any heist, the timing was everything. He had to make sure he was there on the exact day the glass container housing his target was due to be replaced, thanks to corrosion damage, having been gradually melted and worn away over time. At an intensely precise moment on precisely the right day, Kasdan had to enter the cell and sedate not only the research staff that had come to swap out the glass container, but the armed guards posted outside too. Then, it was just a case of slipping on the specialized gloves he'd been issued, grabbing the mask, and stashing it in the bag with protective lining to stop it from being corroded during transit. All things considered, Kasdan had been doing pretty well, given the circumstances. That was until he heard the blare of alarms ringing out. His heart, which had already been drumming away in his chest through sheer nerves, now began beating so fast it threatened to crack his ribs. Panic shot through his entire system, and at that moment, all sense of rationality was dropped faster than a lead balloon. Any further attempts at subterfuge were pointless. Why keep hiding? Surely the alarms were for him, Kasdan thought, and immediately started running, losing all cover. He barged past a pair of Foundation researchers in lab coats, knocking them both to the ground. A storm of paper files they'd been carrying were hurled up into the air, a temporary smoke screen to cover Kasdan's panicked escape. One foot launching past the other, he barreled down the facility's corridors the same way he'd come in. If he was quick, he might make it before they sealed the exits and trapped him inside. The chances were slim, and Kasdan knew it, but he was left with no other choice apart from letting the SCP Foundation catch him, hauling him off to God knows where for interrogation. He barreled past more Foundation staff, some of them holding their hands out to try and stop him as they figured out what the alarms were for and why Kasdan was running. Shoving one out of the way, he felt something snag at the lab coat he'd worn as a disguise. One of the researchers had him. Kicking a leg back, Kasdan clipped the man's knee and whipped himself free of the coat, not letting him stop from running. He was close now, so close to the door he'd come in through. If he could just pass this corner, he'd be home free. The clomp of multiple heavy steel-toed tactical boots came rushing through the entrance to meet him. A squad of men, one of the Foundation's infamous mobile task forces, were hurtling towards Kasdan like a tidal wave wearing all-black combat gear. He skidded as he tried to turn back the way he'd come, stumbling over his feet as he was chased by the sound of angry shouts commanding him to freeze, drop the bag, and get on the ground. Kasdan dared not look over his shoulder, catching hints of the oncoming MTF agents in his peripheral vision, compelling him to keep running. But with no idea where to go, and 4 heavily armed operatives clipping at his heels, there was little hope of escaping now. A powerful weighty force struck Kasdan's back, knocking the air out of his lungs as it pushed him over and kept him pinned to the floor. He could barely move as the agent tackled him, gasping as he desperately tried to pull his breath back. The rest of the squad gathered around him, all yelling and warning him not to move. But there was another sound. No, another voice drowning out the soldiers. The earpiece, the one thing keeping his mind safe. It was gone. It must have fallen out when he hit the ground. And now, the mask could get in. The whispering was unintelligible. Nonsense, really. Kasdan couldn't clearly make out what it was saying. He only knew it had quickly become the only thing he could hear, and how it made him feel. He had to put the mask on. It was such a strong compulsion. It felt like so much more than a want, a desire to wear it. It was a need. The bag was so close, dropped to the floor where he had been tackled. If he could just reach it and tear the zipper open, he'd have the mask in his hands. Rolling over, Kasdan lashed out at the MTF operative, catching him by surprise as his fist connected with the man's balaclava-covered face. The agent was stunned, lifting some of his weight that had been pinning the thief down, just enough for Kasdan to free his other hand. Another pair of agents tried to hold his flailing arms to the ground, only for him to reach up and pull one of them face first into the concrete floor with a bloody crunch. With every ounce of strength he could muster, Kasdan moved like a man possessed, hurling the agent on his other arm into the first who had tackled him. Slipping out from underneath the crumpled agents, he crawled on his stomach as far and as fast as he could. Kasdan desperately scrambled for the duffel bag. It was so close, a mere few inches away, his fingertips brushing up against it as he reached, but he couldn't grab it, as much as he felt that overwhelming need to. His feet were still buried under the weight of the MTF operators and their gear, stopping him from reaching any further, until one of the agents moved, just enough to free Kasdan's foot. Everything seemed to move in slow motion. The MTF soldiers were reaching out to pull Kasdan off the floor. As his hands shot forward and tightly gripped the straps of his bag, he could feel hands wrapped in tactical gloves gripping at his shirt. In that same instant, he wrenched the bag towards him and pulled down the zipper. He had to get what was inside, even if it killed him. He barely noticed his earpiece getting crunched under the heavy combat boot of one of the agents. Instead, he was inhaling fumes from the interior of the bag, its specialized inner lining already melting thanks to the viscous black substance secreting from the mask. Kasdan didn't even register the pain in his hands when he reached inside, the secretion corroding his bare skin as he retrieved what he'd been hired to steal, what he so now desperately needed to put on his face. SCP-035, the Possessive Mask. Time felt like it had ground to a halt, freezing everyone. Kasdan stared for a split second at the white porcelain surface of the mask. It felt like it was glaring hatefully at him, thanks to its exaggerated tragedy grimace. It was almost as if it disapproved of Kasdan, as if he was somehow unworthy of it. But holding it in his hands, the compulsion to put on SCP-035 was now so unbearable. Oblivious to the Foundation agents around him who were trying in vain to restrain him again, Kasdan tipped his face into the mask, and everything went black. It was like being half asleep, his awareness of certain things stripped away. Things like the pain searing his face, a gradual, acidic burning that was eating away at his flesh, corroding his body. And yet Kasdan could still feel occasional sensations, tremors running up his arms as his fists made contact with something, then pulled back and struck again, leaving behind something wet on his knuckles. But he couldn't see. All around him was shrouded in darkness. He knew his body was moving, maybe even walking, taking him somewhere, but he had no clue where, and no control anymore. It was like something else had pushed his mind out of the driver's seat, and now had both its corruptive hands on the wheel. His mind was now lost in the blackness, shut down, gone. It was only when he came back around that Kasdan felt the sheer, unrelenting agony fully wash over him. The mask was off again, leaving him a scorched, screaming mess. He was laying on the floor of another containment cell. This one was different from the one he'd stolen SCP-035 from. It was less heavily guarded, minimal security. It might not even have been in the same facility. Kasdan had no idea how long he'd been wearing the mask for. All he knew, apart from the intense pain of the corrosive black sludge breaking his body down and the bloodstains on his hands and clothes, was that he wasn't alone. Someone else was there with him. Kasdan didn't know the strangest part of all of this. He should be dead. No, he was dead. Much like Dr. Bright's medallion, the Possessive Mask typically wipes the human mind like OxyClean. If he was back, it meant somebody brought him back. Somebody with truly great power. Craning his head up, he caught sight of the cell's only other occupant. Even squinting through his stinging eyes, Kasdan couldn't make out exactly where the other man was from, only that he was much older. He was looking down at Kasdan writhing on the floor. There was something almost sad lingering in his eyes. There was a kind sympathy behind them, not just from looking at someone with such severe injuries, but an almost apologetic gaze, like he was sorry that the pain even existed in the first place.
"Glad to see you back, my son,"
the old man said.
"It's been a while since I've needed to pull someone back from that deep in the darkness. I was worried I'd be a little rusty."
The old man gently reached a hand out towards him and took Kasdan's pain away. He didn't heal him, not fully, just hit pause on his wounds. But before he could thank the kind stranger, the mask started whispering again. Only this time, it was calling to the old man. No longer hurting, but still reeling from what SCP-035 had done to him, Kasdan tried to stop the man, calling with a rasping voice, begging him not to listen to the Possessive Mask's call. He didn't seem as spellbound as Kasdan had been. In fact, the old man almost just looked like he was going through the motions, pacing over to where SCP-035 lay on the cell floor, picking it up, and just like Kasdan had done, he lifted the porcelain mask over his wrinkled, wizened face. Helpless, unable to do anything other than watch on in horror, Kasdan couldn't help but notice the tragic frown carved onto the surface of SCP-035 had shifted. Now, it was a wide, gaping smile, a comedic grin, with nothing but ill intent behind it. While he had no idea who the old man was, some swirling, sickening feeling in the pit of Kasdan's stomach told him nothing good could come from putting that twisted mask over another anomalous being. If he had only known that SCP-343 was colloquially nicknamed God by the Foundation's staff, and was widely believed to be the sole creator of the entire universe, then Kasdan would have used all his strength to pull the mask off of the old man's face and smash it to pieces. But it was already too late. The very second the Possessive Mask slipped over SCP-343's face, the ground shook violently, like the very earth itself was afraid of what had just happened. Still watching from the cell floor, Kasdan looked at this combined creature. It stood still for a moment, slowly breathing through the mask, before it lifted its hands and appeared to examine them. The comedy smile on SCP-035 made it seem like the mask itself was looking with a warped sense of glee at its new host body. More of that same black goo was being secreted out from beneath the mask. Drops of it were rolling off the old man's shoulders. They landed on the cell floor, melting tiny, burning holes as the substance dripped down through the concrete and steel of the facility. His body being puppeteered by the mask on his face, the old man wiped a smear of the sludge away with his hand, looking at it in his fingers. It wasn't melting him the same way it had to Kasdan. Usually, the corrosive secretion that SCP-035 naturally produced proved to be its weakness, melting the bodies of its human hosts and eventually destroying them, leaving the mask without a form to pilot. SCP-343, on the other hand, was only humanoid in shape, and far beyond any mortal being that the Possessive Mask had ever enthralled. The combined being, corruptive mask and omnipotent god, raised its hands high, like a conductor before an orchestra. From the spot he lay in, Kasdan watched in horror as every member of staff in the facility was pulled up through the floor, or dragged screaming through the walls, piping and brickwork tearing through them. This was a minimum security Foundation wing, far more relaxed with only a handful of staff and a light force of guards. Still, to SCP-035, it didn't matter how many there were, it was enough to make a start. The wrinkly hands of its new hosts clenched sharply. The Foundation staff, all suspended in mid-air, suddenly exploded. Each one of them, every researcher and guard, erupted into a fireball, burning white-hot like heated metal before fizzling out. There was nothing left, no scraps of clothing, no remains. They just weren't. If it wanted to, SCP-035 would have thrown its head back and laughed maniacally. In some strange way, Kasdan thought that might have been better. Instead, it was silent, the mask's wide, soulless grin conveying its twisted delight well enough. It turned to face the wall, thick layers of concrete standing between it and the outside world, and began stepping forward, so completely casually that it was unnerving. With its first step, the walls of the cell surrounding the SCP-035 and SCP-343 hybrid, as well as Kasdan, began to crumble away. With the second, The corridor outside did the same, falling apart without any exertion of effort from the masked god. Each and every step further, more of the building around them was chipped away, carving a path through rooms and research stations towards the edge of the site. It was as though the concrete and brickwork, the dense, heavy materials that constructed the facility, suddenly had the consistency of wet sand, and SCP-035 and its new host were the tides coming in, washing away all in their path. No longer in pain, but his body distorted beyond repair, Kasdan forced himself up off the ground at last. Weakly, he limped after the creature, thinking in vain he had any chance to stand against a being with the unbridled power of a god and the infinite cruelty and malice of the Possessive Mask. If he could just get close enough, Kasdan thought, he could tear the mask away, freeing the old man. He wouldn't be able to stop himself from putting it on a second time, but perhaps it was better that Kasdan wore it and let its black ooze melt him down. At least the wise, kindly old man would be able to get far enough away from SCP-035's influence, and Kasdan could, at least in part, put this right. After all, he'd stolen the mask from the Foundation. This all started with him. As the hybrid reached the farthest wall, the barrier turned to glass and shattered. The combined monster looked out over the waiting, helpless world. Through SCP-343, the Possessive Mask had control over chaos and creation alike, and nothing on Earth that could challenge it. Not the Foundation, not humanity, not even other anomalies. Lifting its still, lifeless, grinning mask upwards, the sky darkened, the deafening boom of thunder ringing out above. Forked bolts of deep orange lightning cracked across the atmosphere, as what was left of the Foundation facility dissolved behind the masked god. Though it was facing out towards a world that would soon crumble as easily as this building, the creature could see everything, far beyond where it stood, the lives of billions upon billions. All at once, it watched plants grow while others wilted, animals born only to die, humans living out their ritualistic existences, each one of them gradually heading for the same fate. And through all of that, it saw a hand trembling behind it, reaching for its mask. Kasdan. He was so close, fingertips just about to brush the porcelain surface of SCP-035, when suddenly the mask and the old man wearing it were gone. Kasdan turned around in confusion, only to find it was now standing behind him. It reached out one of the wrinkled, bony old hands and touched a single finger on his forehead. Kasdan blinked, and he was back. Back before the heist, before any of the wanton devastation had begun. He recognized the room he was in, and sat in the very same place where his mysterious benefactor had approached him with a seemingly impossible job: to steal a mask from the SCP Foundation. Sure enough, sitting across the table, obscured by shadow, was the client. But behind his eyes, Kasdan was trapped, helpless as he watched himself live out the same events that had led to the mask being placed on the face of God. He couldn't change the course of history, couldn't avert the apocalypse that was already happening. All he could do was watch, his heart sinking as his client pushed a file across the table, opening it to reveal a photograph of his target, the thing he wanted Kasdan to steal: SCP-035, the Possessive Mask. And meanwhile, back in the new hell of its own creation, the mask was having some real fun. Now go and check out SCP-035, the Possessive Mask, and SCP-343 God to learn even more about this pair of anomalies, and pray that nobody ever has the chance to combine them.